Good evening. This video is a remake, re-narration mostly, of a video that was originally made before Walten Files 4. I've left the original video in a playlist off of my channel's main uploads as proof that this is indeed a script from 2022, as all this is meant to do is make it so my first video isn't 3 years separated from the rest of my future content when it comes to audio quality and voicing. So, enjoy this little rehash of my very first video. With Walten Files 4 coming at an unknown time, as well as Martin Wall swearing off of Twitter and any teasers that may come with it, how about we take a small trip down memory lane and catch back up on the series, what's happened, where we are, and what we can infer from it. If you haven't seen it yet, it's an excellent series, and I suggest you check it out, because super spoilers are ahead. But if you just arrived a little late and want to catch up, or just couldn't be bothered to rewatch it, you are free to stay. With that said, let's recap. It starts with Jack Walten and Felix Kranken, two college students in 1958, sharing the idea and working together on a project, Bon's Burgers, a restaurant with a band of computer-animated robots called the Showstoppers as entertainment. Bon, Shaw, Boozoo, and Benny, with a discarded Billy robot that may have been an earlier model before their company, Bunny Smiles Inc., were eventually purchased. During this 16-year-long venture, Jack has 3 kids with his wife, Rosemary Walten, Sophie Walten, born 1960, Ed Walten, born May 15, 1962, and Molly Walten, born August 22, 1965. On Felix's side, we have his wife, Linda Kranken, and crippling alcoholism. After some time working on the project, around 1965, the duo pitched the idea to another company, Cyberfun Tech, to be bought and invested in. 1970, Rocket is made, gifted to Molly and named by Molly, and Felix's drinking worsens. 1973, Felix is submerged in the project and has even worse drinking. May 1st, 1974, Felix snaps in some way at Linda, and she decides to move out the following day, May 2nd, 1974. Jack is busy with paperwork, Rosie is taking Sophie to the dentist, and Felix is the only one free that day. Felix agrees to the favor of picking Ed and Molly up to and from the school event that they have, but gets drunk at the event, and when he has to drive them back, he crashes the car and kills Ed and Molly, burying them in St. Juana's forest. Where he leaves the bodies, the spirits of Ed and Molly rise from their graves and possess Rocket. Now we have to deal with a bit of a time skip, as we have quite the gap to what happens before the next major event, Jack's disappearance on June 11th, 1974. Jack going missing is something I'll get to later once we get to theorizing, so for now, he's just missing. June 28th, 1974, the restaurant opens with each terrifying animatronic to entertain, except for Billy. The first birthday party on June 30th, 1974, is the same day that Susan, the technician who essentially built these robots herself, gets stuffed into Benny by the Bon animatronic. The restaurant continues on with someone named Charles going missing July 14th, 1974, and being put inside of Boozoo the ringleader, and the last show happens on July 19th, 1974. That same day, Rosie goes missing and is stuffed into Shaw the sheep, and whose cries were probably the ones that people were hearing before the establishment is closed on July 20th, 1974. 22 days in total. Something happens on October 31st, 1974, God knows fucking what since we don't get a caption in the video. Around 2 months later, December 10th, 1974, K9 opens, a new project to store all items of value from the condemned and closed for good Bon's Burgers due to the incidents of 1974 in a bunker in St. Juana's forest. Items for the taking are such as arcade machines, props, and of course, animatronics. They start to get everything shipped there by January 23rd, 1975, and another gap in events for the timeline begins as 3 years pass. In the hiatus that the company has when it comes to their animatronic burger restaurant, they release some other content to be consumed by the masses in the meantime. Books, merch, animated shows, and movies with such classics as Why 4th of July Matters, Bunny Comics number 27, and The Disappearance of Jack Walten, VHS edition no less. With all of that, you'd be surprised to hear that they were going through 4 long years of legal paperwork. Eventually, Felix got the idea to use the funding grown from that extra product to execute the Relocate project, a backup plan that was created after the premature closing of the original Bon's Burgers establishment to bring back all of the valuable items brought to the St. Juana's Forest Canine Bunker and into a new location in the near future of 1982. July 12th, 1978, 3 technicians volunteer to stay in this hellhole for 3 days to make repairs for the animatronics for the Relocate project. These 3 are Hillary B, Ashley P, and Kevin W, each of them given a key that leads to the back rooms. Sorry, back doors. But with how big this place is, you can only assume it's the back rooms to make any sense of it. Ashley, on the last night before leaving, decides to explore them alone and finds a couple of things, including the rocket doll, which is there for some reason. She also finds Billy the Clown at the last door with a VHS slot to be filled, then finds a VHS tape that's dated June 11th, 1974. I'd say we can safely assume it's 74, that would just be a troll move if it were some other year that just so happened to be on the same date as Jack Walten's disappearance, one of the biggest mysteries of the series. She sticks it in Billy, gross, and he starts to play a normal animatronic routine for a birthday party, but then shortly turns to a list of names.
Jack, Susan, Charles, Rosemary, Sophie.
The lights go out, back on, Bond attacks her, and she ends up being stuffed into Billy. The other two think she left early and her body is left in the back doors, rots, and pervades an awful smell. The relocate project is unsuccessful. For now. October 10th, 1982, a new facility caretaker is on his way to the K9 facility, sent by a guy named Chris. He starts testing the animatronics, specifically Bond, then gets chased and killed because he was mistaken for someone else, most likely Sophie, which means that Bond, the killer robot, is on the loose. Fucking Chris. October 15th, 1982, Sophie Walten, now 22, and Jenny Letterson, born 1956, age 26, live and work in the Enfront Hotel. In the basement, a new arcade machine that got there, hella expensive, and a beta test for a Bunny Smiles game, Bunny Farm, and it's pretty buggy. Given that it's a beta test, that's believable, but we all know what glitches mean in this series. Sophie has got some hardcore amnesia due to pills that she had to take for unknown reasons. However, it seems the reasons are for having some participation or witness to the missing cases events to make the people of them missing. When she plays the game, she gets bombarded with imagery trying to remind her of what happened, eventually giving her the whole play-by-play of the night Ed and Molly died, down to witnessing their souls possess Rocket, by a new character that we haven't got a clue about, Showbear. For reasons unknown to us, the company vanishes in some way during 1983. No, I'm not kidding, look at this description written by Martin himself. Right there. What? Sometime in the future, 2020, Anthony Miller, a mystery hunter who has recently moved to Brighton, Michigan, starts coming across tapes that hold secrets of Bond's Burger's history, and uploads them to the public. And that's about everything there is in the timeline of the Walten Files. With everything concretely known out of the way, let's get to some theories. No, allow me to begin with a detail I mentioned earlier during the recap. In File 2, I'm going to be calling these episodes Files by the way, the technician trio have a little talk about the company's history and mention this.
But yeah, the police closed after people reported hearing the screams of an adult woman.
That was Rosie. How do I know it was Rosie's screams? Well, if you listen closely here, you can probably hear her screams in this footage of Bunny Farm that's heavily implied to be promptly after her stuffing. Okay, that's enough. Another detail that I haven't heard anyone mention, and I have to be goddamn insane to be the only one to notice this, but everybody uses subtitles, right? The audio quality in this series is, immersively mind you, 70s and 80s as all hell, and by that I mean garbage and garbled, but that was what you had to work with back then with technology. My point is, in File 1 during the Little Bond's neighborhood section, we have Little Bond trying to light it up with a lighter, and on the fourth light we see this. Sophie in a red outfit with a big boy Bond right behind her, but if you can use subtitles, you get this text. So first off, this is not Sophie working at Bond's Burgers. Everyone we see working there has a purple uniform or their own work outfit and attire, and this is very much a post-K9 Bond. As far as we know, any and all damage that occurred to him, besides the exposing of his endoskeleton forearms and shins, happened after closure. We'll get to Bond and his whole ordeal eventually. For now, he's just a killing machine. Secondly, who is she talking to? Well, when I first saw this, I admit, I also thought this was Sophie luring in Rosie, or some other event where she's somehow, for some reason, cooperating with Bond in some way, telling him to stay as she investigates. But noticing the damage and the ever-so-curious gaping hole in Bond's chest, indicating a post-K9 Bond as I mentioned before, I believe that she's talking to Jenny during a blackout in the Enfront Hotel, telling her to stay while she goes to investigate around with the big scare of her trying to light the lighter and Bond already being there to do God knows what. Now, here's a big question mark for me. Lucky you. This video has me confused. Most of the dates and timeline it lays out make sense, though I might have lied to you guys when I said what happened on the dates of December 10th, 1974 and January 23rd, 1975, because they have no caption or subscript whatsoever. The latter of which we know to be the date on one of the files Krankenstein that we see in File 2, but the name of the file is Storage K9. So what exactly happened on the 10th of December, 1974? Did K9 open and is that second date the start of moving things there? I still stand by what I said earlier, but the lack of context to these dates is very odd to me. Next, we have the narrator. He starts off by referring to someone, Sophie most likely, as My Little Bunny, and proclaims he'll tell a story of broken and beautiful people. Along, he tells us that
He is so sorry about what he did to them, but there's nothing he can do. Remember that.
So far so good, I believe we can all agree that it's talking about Ed and Molly. He then goes into a Local 58 style loop of safety in pills, Sophie, while showing footage of two deaths, that of Brian Stills and Ashley P., both of which are post K9. Then we get a short glimpse of the cartoon show bear, the pills, and then we get a second narrator via text talking about how he made them beautiful, despite not knowing how or meaning to, as well as the context behind the glitches and general horrific alterations we see in the series being the soul's cries for help. This narrator, from what we see in the series, should be Bon, and now we can finally talk about him. Bon is essentially a walking mystery killing machine. There are so many questions about him, so let's break down some questions and theories to answer them. First off, while we're still on the topic of Lucky You, this Bon narration is rather odd, because Bon is talking to Sophie, yet despite having been the main perpetrator of most of the deaths in this series, uses us in this little quote here. Are the spirits trying to talk to him as well, to help him remember what happened that year? Granted, we can't precisely know what he's talking about since that year is pretty damn vague, so that's a bit of a void to be filled. But what else do we have? Well, the other main question surrounding him is his violent behavior, and the main theory that most people subscribe to, from what I know, goes a little something like this. When Felix crashed the car and killed Ed and Molly, he decided at some point to hatch the plan of killing 5 main witnesses: Jack, Susan, Charles, Rosemary, and Sophie, and reprogrammed the Bon bot to kill these 5 and stuff them into animatronics. Those animatronics would then be shipped off to the K9 bunker, all corpses to decay, and for the company to make a comeback once everyone had forgotten the scandal. His main loose thread being Sophie, because he just couldn't do it, and instead gave her pills to forget about the whole thing. The cassette tape inside of Billy was a hit list for Felix to store, and possibly the trigger audio for the Bon bot to start killing if it saw any of those 5 people's faces. So does this make sense? I have a bit of a bone to pick with this theory for certain reasons you'll see, so if you personally believe in it, I apologize in advance for my indirect aggression towards you. Well, how about we run down its merits? Felix is a cunt. He's an alcoholic, he's probably a wife beater, and in general thinks himself a good person and
A man with not only a giant brain, but also a giant heart.
if anybody in the series were to be straight up malicious, he would be the top suspect. This, along with the fact that he would most likely go to prison if the news were to get out. He probably would want to avoid that. On top of all that, he also probably has a good amount of time to himself to work at the place now that his wife is gone and to reprogram the Bon animatronic. Okay, now let's talk about everything else. Beginning with a few small details, K9 being built 5 months after closure, despite being a full bunker in that you'd probably expect it to take longer, so it must be pre-planned. However, with a timeline that we know, that suggests that Felix came up with this multiple year spanning plan whilst burying Ed and Molly, and his thoughts were very much clearly somewhere else. The earliest he could have possibly started would be something like May 12th, and that's being generous. That's still only 8 or so months to do that. He would have to keep it a secret, since if he announced and started it early, people would think that would be a waste of resources when it's a backup plan. Next, you have the fact that Felix would have to do this programming on his own with no one else knowing. Oh, we'll have a talk about that teaser, you better bet that. We even explicitly have someone stated as the person who essentially built the animatronics in Susan Woodings. She would most likely check into programming with the animatronics the days preceding opening day, wouldn't you think? I know Susan is put inside of the dumb bunny, but she isn't herself a dumb bunny. She would keep track of any alterations in the code and be aware of them. Speaking of Susan, how about the murder plans that we know of? That being only 2, since we've only been shown Susan and Rosie's deaths of the 5 in the hit list, with Rosie making a bit more sense, where she seemed to be lured to the back by Sophie to be dismembered and stuffed into Shaw. Should I yell? I yelled in the original video, but it's not really my style anymore, at least not so suddenly. Let me see what I can do. Which then begs the question of, what are you doing, Felix? Sophie is right there. You have killed 2 of your best friend's daughters. You have killed 2 of your friends, one of them being your best friend's wife, and you have killed your best friend. Why would this be the line that you don't cross? Then there's Susan, who has quite a different reason to get close to Bod, which is because she had been seeing irregularities in him, only for her to do maintenance and get the old Bonsberger's surprise. How do you do that? How do you reprogram a robot in a way that it purposefully glitches out enough to not be a total shutdown, but enough to cause concern for any trained technician's eye? Especially when we're talking about 70s technology and the fact, again, that you aren't even the main technician for these bots. Then there's the pills. I'm not sure how diagnosis for medication worked back in the 70s and 80s, but I think you would have to get the person who knows why the medication is needed to testify or admit to why, so that the doctor knows it's safe to give it, especially if we're talking about memory repression here. I know Felix can tell them that she needs them because of her family's death, but they would most likely need more specifics for them to know that's why she needs the pills, since the deaths of family members, although tragic, is not necessarily rare and would need more warrant to supersede regular therapy. So what about the fundamentals of this theory? Can they still hold up to any disputes? Starting with the idea that Felix would commit to this plan. This is a lot of work, focus, and lies to keep together for someone who is an established alcoholic, lest this become his new fixation to remedy his emotions to replace alcoholism. Accounting for his sadness and guilt for accidentally killing loved ones by purposefully killing even more loved ones that you've known for even longer. That doesn't quite make sense now, does it? Also consider the general emotional state of Felix. He is in the most curl up in a ball and give up state of guilt, which is essentially the title of the unlisted video showing his reaction to Ed and Molly's death. For him to decide to cover it up by brutalizing anyone who could possibly be a threat of knowing is quite the stretch. If anything, he would be more likely to admit himself to the police and do his time. He even admits he has a problem, which is why he records this audio. Any thoughts or plans that he comes up with then are most likely to be forgotten by the time he wakes up. Moving along, there is no way this hit list covers all witnesses. This is an entire company bought by another company. I know there isn't any internet, not to the level that we have now at least, but Jack is most likely going to bring the news at some point or another, and as the founder of Bond's Burgers, many people are going to hear about it, including somebody who just might tear this entire theory apart. One man, one name, Chris. Chris is somebody we essentially know fuck all about, but we know that he does have involvement in the company in some form, being mentioned in Susan's audio log in buddy form, but he isn't on the hit list, nor does he die, as he is mentioned in 1982 when Brian is driving to the K9 facility, mentioning that Chris sent him there, and I'm not going to believe for a second that Felix paid him off or gave him pills too. Then there's also the fact that this hit list tape is dated June 11th, 1970 blank. I'd expect it to be dated much earlier if this is him coming up with the hit list, and why make a hit list for a number of people that you can count on one hand who you know personally? Given what this theory proposes about Bond, what about the way he acts? He doesn't really seem to have the movements of a thoughtless machine. We see him put his hands over his face multiple times as if he were in pain and confusion, as well as some imagery of tears or tear-like streaks running down his face. Though this is more likely a symbolic or purely horror factor, I'd still say to take it into consideration for what it could mean. Bond talks, and not just some text-to-speech basics like he talks, he tells Rosie,
You will beautiful.
as well as seeming to be not only sentient, but having a philosophy around the entire thing of killing people and stuffing them into these animatronics, claiming that it makes them beautiful. Why would a programmed robot have anything even remotely close to any of that? Speaking of the animatronics, why stuff the bodies in them in the first place? We're even shown the extent of which it would take to put someone in one of these and the damage and the mess it would make. Rosie has to get dismembered, Susan is paralyzed, Charles gets his fucking teeth and eyes ripped out to fit into the bozo face and head. Ashley, this shit is brutal and going to leave evidence of murder everywhere over the scene. Not to mention the fact that if anyone were to do maintenance on any of these animatronics while the restaurant was open, they'd get assaulted with a sight and smell of a mangled corpse and would most likely also have to get killed because no witnesses, along with the fact that we're assuming it's AI. Why would you send facility caretakers, or anyone for that matter, to the K9 bunker if this thing was reprogrammed to fucking kill people? Why have Bond's Burgers make a return at all? If you leave it all in the forest, left to Mother Nature to rot and decay for good, nobody will bring it up and people will be destined to forget eventually. If you bring it back, everybody's going to remember because of all the mystique around it, and there are so many things you could not be accounting for that could mess this all up. If Felix were the cold and calculated killer this theory suggests he is, he wouldn't bother with any of this. Just kill them with a gun or still use Bond and just bury them in St. Juana's forest with Ed and Molly. However, with all of that, Martin posted a very interesting teaser, a detective log with quite a few things to say about this whole debacle. However, of note here is something I discovered while I was originally recording this video, a then new teaser compilation for the Walten Files, which will be linked in the description in this video. It essentially gave every official teaser possible for anything Walten Files or other Walten Files related projects. However, one thing I discovered, if the video is to be believed, was a tradition that the official Walten Files Discord server partakes in whenever there is an upcoming file known as Spoiler Season. Despite the name, it's actually not an unload of information. Instead, it is where the mods post a bunch of static or video teasers, and one or more is real. This image was one of many posted for Walten Files 4's Spoiler Season, meaning it most likely isn't even real, so consider this to be my reasoning for why it's fake. Though I will still warn you, we're getting into spoiler/teaser territory here, so if those make you jump to here. This log is written by Detective Frank Davis, who is investigating Felix Kranken along with Detective Collins. In this log, Frank describes a new, or more so old, department that seems to have outsourced a lot of the technical material and aspects of the company. In the building, they find computers that are, and I quote, filled to the brim with random bits of code and formatting. Taking it back to the tech people at the lab, they find pieces of an executable that's able to be controlled from a secondary location. They still haven't found out if it takes logs, whatever that means. They believe it to be how Felix could have used the robots to kill anyone he may have had a vendetta against. His idea of the motive being a vendetta insinuates them not knowing about the freak car accident. Fun fact, vendetta is apparently to describe a type of vengeance for the murder of one's family against the murderer. Kind of ironic given the fact that it was Felix that killed the family of Jack, unless that double meaning is intentional, of course. Apparently, the last use of this executable was sometime in July of 1974. They haven't found anything in the logs, again whatever those are, yet they still are uncovering a cache of unique and unfound code, with the date of the log being May 1st, 1977. So, does this disprove everything I've been saying for the past few minutes and make any and all of it moot? Well, first, we do accept the idea that these spirits can corrupt and alter analog to bring certain messages, right? So there's technically nothing preventing us from including the possibility that this could just be the spirit of whoever is inside of Bond having his stream of consciousness documented. Second, a secondary location is very vague, and this is still early 70s technology. How is Felix going to get any meaningful control of it from far away? He probably isn't. So then you would have to say that he's sitting in the corner controlling Bond to do all of this, as well as the fact that you're telling me all of the things I mentioned about Bond's behavior, speaking, weird movements, philosophy, are all coming from Felix controlling him. You're also essentially telling me to ignore the event of Brian and Ashley's deaths. The last time this executable was used was in July of 1974, yet Bond maintains violence. Was Felix sitting in the corner here waiting for witnesses, so that he can jump out at Ashley for seeing something she wasn't supposed to, even though she might not even understand the context behind that list of names? Felix would have to be waiting here for anyone to come, only to kill them if they looked even remotely like Sophie. Which, by the way, how would someone mistake Brian for Sophie? I know they wear similar outfits, but fuck, everything else seems to be differentiable. Third, these computers are filled to the brim with code, with parts of an executable. The amount of effort to hide this in comparison to just burning it, or smashing it up, and burning it, or literally just deleting the goddamn code is astonishing here. I said it before, I'll say it again, Felix isn't even the technician for these things, and he has about 2 months, 3 if we're being generous, to do all of this. He needs to hire technicians to work on this shit. Fourth, Felix should be deader than Disco by 1982 if they are this close to finding out the truth. Otherwise, Felix would have to kill everyone who has ever worked on this case to make sure news doesn't get out. That is impossible. Fifth, Martin is rather well known for being particularly tight-lipped about the series, going as far as to say that he wants 85% of File 4 to be a surprise. So to give this bombshell out as a teaser seems rather unmatching with that. Remember, this is one of the main mysteries of the series besides that of what happened to Jack. That, and you're saying that all the holes I have pointed out in the theory have now become holes in the story. Holes that would actually cripple the very investment many have because it is so well put together in general. Sixth, literally everything else I have said about this theory still stands up against this. The case for whether or not Felix did it is closed. He may be a cunt, but he is not guilty of this. Moving on to some other plausible theories for Bond becoming rabid, we have the idea that Ed and Molly are the ones controlling him as a collective, and the rocket doll is how they move from place to place. I can accept the idea that the rocket doll can in fact move. We see it stand up after being possessed by Ed and Molly, go from somewhere in St. Juana's Forest to one of the back doors of the canine facility, and we also have this shot that looks like Rocket sitting in the Walten house. Then there's the shot from the end of Bunny Farm of what one can assume to be Ed and Molly flashing in front of Bond while he has this weird whatever this is. Other than that, not much to say about it. My only problems with this theory are that of the spirits going from a doll to a robot. It then forces me to ask, what's the limit? How many humanoid type devices or machines can one spirit possess? Leaving it to possessing an animatronic and having their souls cries for help echoing his messages and glitches inside tapes, games, and any other sort of analog was enough. But now you're telling me that they can possess multiple animatronics? What's the limit? Why would they possess a doll, go into another robot, and then decide, instead of killing Felix, to make the others beautiful? Where does that idea come from for them? So what about the idea of Jack being inside of Bond? Well, how would that thread go? I'll try to cobble together anything that I can to make a coherent storyline for this theory, since mostly I've just seen that of, it could be Jack, I don't know. I'll start with small details, then I'll get to the essence of how I think the theory works. First off, Jack has plenty of distorted face shots, which is usually one of the main elements associated with being stuffed inside an animatronic, as well as the fact that the main element of this distorted face is his big smile, something that matches up with Bond's facial design quite well. Ever notice how Jack, whenever we see him, he's always portrayed in black and white? I'll get to that later and how it could actually counter the theory, but I can see the possibility that his whole black and white thing is simply the color of his soul, like how Ed and Molly are the two red children. There also could be a play on words in File 2 where Rosie's told that Jack is in the backstage, and when she goes in there she finds Bond. You know, just a thought. Another detail that I find interesting is that Brian Stills in File 1 initially refers to Bond as a thing.
What was that thing?
only to refer to it as he once he's dead. I understand this could be by complete accident. Bond, the character, is, from what I understand, a he himself, so Brian saying he because of the gender of the character of the bot isn't too much of a stretch. However, Martin has proved very thorough in details. Just take a look at Bunny Farm and you'd understand what I mean. There's also this little frame from File 1 where we see the Bond character with what looks to be seams on the back, suggesting a possible stuffing because I haven't got a clue why else this would be here if it isn't making that sort of hint. Just draw a normal back. And of course you have the couple's photo style frame of Shaw and Bond together in File 2. With all those possible hints covered, here goes with trying to describe the storyline. When Jack finds where Ed and Molly were buried, he witnesses their spirits going into Rocket Rabbit, evidenced by the crying we keep hearing with distorted audio akin to the one we hear when we see the Jack missing poster file in File 1. When Sophie, playing as Bond, comes across the two red children, and as we watch the two red children possess Rocket. Because of such a distressing sight, only to see Rocket come to life with the two inside, he goes insane and believes that the two have become beautiful, and that he must make himself and all the others in that list beautiful. Given that the tape is dated the date he went missing, I essentially believe it's his last wish before trying to become Bond, like his will. He hangs himself in the St. Juana's forest, seen in this teaser, the red sensor box hiding Jack's hanging body, and eventually wakes up inside of Bond. Trying to gain an awareness as Bond, ends up glitching out and getting Susan all to himself to make her beautiful, eventually getting to Charles and being able to get Rosie in the backstage to dismember her, and put her into Shaw. Because of these incidents, he has to be shipped away to the K9 facility. In the facility, he takes another victim, Ashley, shuts down for a while, only to be reawakened by Brian once he gets to the facility and does maintenance on Bond, allowing him to go on the hunt for Sophie to make her beautiful too. You still have the whole of why he doesn't kill Felix, since Jack is heavily insinuated to have a strong hatred for him, and I don't think I need to tell you why that's the case. Jack also seems to be his own monster, with his own specific appearance in reference to his constant monochromaticity. No, I did not know that was a word until I wrote this script. We never see his face overlaid on any animatronic, and my rule of thumb for that is if you're not trading faces with an animatronic, you're not inside of them. This could be explicit, with things like showing Ashley's face behind Billy's and showing Rosemary getting stuffed into Shaw, or implicit like Charles' face being able to be seen in the background of Boozer's introduction in Bunny Form, or Rosemary being swapped in with Shaw at a quick pace in File 2. So far we haven't seen anything like that for Bond with Jack, though there are a few scenes where Jack is in proximity to Bond, and though that could possibly not mean anything, case in point Jack appearing at Billy's section of Bunny Form, I still want to note it. That as well as the whole thing of Jack being missing is essentially the topic of this little Bond's neighborhood short. Jack appears in Bond's backpack while checking in on supplies, and Jack's crying being played over Bond finding the spirits. I know that it sounds like it's actually supposed to be Felix's crying, but if you listen closely to this, you can hear that crying along with Felix's screaming as separate audio. As well as the fact that the crying is still heard during Rocket's possession despite, from what we know, Felix not witnessing that. So it's Jack's. The other flaw is that the hit list being a will is still a bit of a stretch, even with what we know about how spirits can affect analog, though I'd say one other hole is the most interesting of the bunch. Remember that thing about Jack always being black and white? If he's supposed to be in this shot, even if he's censored by a red box, that could possibly be going against all his other appearances. There's also this character, the Shadow Man, whom we know very little about, but the idea behind that connection is very simple. You know, black and white, Shadow Man. It could also just be his form outside of Bond, again, like Ed and Molly as the two red children. We see Shadow Man hiding behind Bond in the Bunny Farm Spot the Difference game, in fact that looks to be Jack's silhouette, and black and white over Bond reaching for Susan. It's got very little against it, but it also has very little going for it, including the fact that there is this odd connection between being black and white with a bit of tear imagery and possessing an animatronic. I know it could just be going crazy, it's been a few days since I've last had my pills, and there seem to be exceptions to this rule with the whole black and white filter, such as Brian with his ID card, Felix, the rest of Ashley's trio, but look at this. Susan Banny, we get a glimpse of Susan stuffed into Banny face in black and white, as well as getting this tear shot in her death scene. Charles Boozoo, here, and here, all with tears. Rosemary Shaw, we see a quick glimpse of Rosie as a shadow, and a picture of what I assume to be Rosie's face with black tears. Ashley Billy, we see her face degrade into almost full darkness as we hear her scream as she's stuffed into Billy, as well as see her face as black and white in Bunny Farm. Not sure if we get any tear shots for her. Once again, I understand I could just be seeing coincidental patterns or misconnecting the pattern to something unintended. It could just be a spooky filter or maybe just to represent death in general, though I still hold on to this idea mostly because of Rosie. Why have this frame? What purpose does it serve? Why not just have another super distortion or something along those lines? I just feel like it has to mean something if it's this consistent. I mentioned the Shadow Man earlier, and he's also a big question mark to be filled. His positioning in Shaw's death scene would suggest him to be Sophie, but just in that sentence you can probably see the problem, that of the Shadow Man being a woman, but Billy is still Ashley, so who am I to judge? He's also seen in Foil 2 as following Shaw during the canine orientation. Assuming that she represents Rosie in that foil before her death, the argument for him being Jack might be slightly stronger with the idea that this is Jack following her to his chosen murder bot of possession. Also being seen briefly in Foil 3 in that shot I referred to earlier. According to a post-credits scene in Foil 2, he somehow feeds somebody in some way when lights go off, whatever that means. I'm assuming that's just supposed to mean night. I already mentioned Jack possibly being the Shadow Man with being represented as black and white and always being shown in isolation from any other animatronic, suggesting that he is his own being. It really could be anyone who doesn't have a clear role as far as we know, but for my money, it's Jack's form outside of Bond. Next up, who is Showbear? An hour and a half of this series, and he has to be one of the most unknown characters of all to us, and he's the person to tell us and Sophie about the most important moment in the series thus far. I seriously have nothing on this guy, and I've heard that he isn't going to show up again, but I can't confirm that, so if you know, comment below. His stature is oddly similar to that of the pixelated Bond animatronic. I don't know why, but it's there. He also shows up in Lucky You for a brief moment before fucking off to the next episode. When asked who he is, he responds by showing Ed and Molly, which would mean they are Rocket Rabbit, possibly Bond, and Showbear. What the hell are you two? A few final extra details before we get on to some teasers. Cops at one point had to search Bonds to investigate, we'll talk about that, as well as only one or two families being led in the last few days. Jack Walten is shown to still be signing his own files despite having gone missing 17 days ago. Good for him. I still haven't come across anyone that knows what this says. If you know, comment below. Felix in bunny form also looks a bit like the painting Showbear. During File 2, when it turns to the little TV and its VHS collection, something runs by in the background of the TV. I have no idea what it is. Is it Jack? Felix? What is this? When Ashley looks in the back doors and loses the light while she's panicking, you can hear secondary breathing. Not just any breathing. Deep. Heavy breathing, and there isn't really any other character other than one who we know has a voice similar to that. Of course, that would be Jack Walten, so another possible point for Jack Bond. Also, when Ashley finishes with looking at the rocket doll, we get the same visual effect on the screen as we do when Bond shows up, which could count as another point for Ed and Molly Bond. Alright, let's get into some teasers. Find Jack Walten. This little subspace of teasers is inside of a site that Martin has posted on his Twitter. It's essentially showcasing a bunch of lore that might not be relevant to the story the tapes are telling. For example, Brighton Ghosts. This is Anthony's main mystery hunting site, Anthony being the one who has found these tapes in the world. The main site, however, details the disappearance of Jack Walten, including an interview of Felix Kranken, or at least it did before it got updated. Multiple times. Luckily, with the power of YouTube and alternatively the Wayback Machine, you can find footage or experience all variations of this site. Most of it is just cool little tidbits of horror and humor, though there were 3 particular parts of this site tree that I found interesting. In the September 7th, 2021 version, if you go to Sophie Walten's section, you get a recorded almost interview between Sophie and Jenny. Jenny asks what Sophie's earliest memory is, and Sophie responds with a summer in her teenage, when she was at a police station getting interrogated. She doesn't quite remember what they were interrogating her for, only that she was getting interrogated. She describes Rosie, tall, curly dark brown hair, kind, and caring to a certain limit, something that changed with Jack's disappearance, a name that Sophie can't even remember, yet still noting his certain temper. One thing that doesn't make sense is that she doesn't mention Felix, despite remembering the phone call for the favor.
I remember this conversation.
But this discussion with Jenny was more related to her immediate family and early memories, given that she doesn't mention Susan or Charles either. If you try the Jenny page, there's a certain version on August 1st, 2021, that seems to be a conversation that takes place after Bunny Farm, with Sophie panicking and Jenny trying to calm her down, and believing what she says happened in the game. They were recording the whole thing, so they could probably discuss the footage as thoroughly as they wish to. Along with the interview and this neat artwork in the Walten Files merch store, I'm led to believe that Sophie and Jenny are in fact going to investigate this whole mystery that lies in her memory. The third and final thing just being another super specific detail, that of Jack having last been seen wearing a dark red suit, hammering home the purposefulness of him constantly being black and white in any appearance he has, even outside of the actual files. Now for the teasers, and what might be going on in some of them. The way I'm going to do this is by organizing it by scene, with shots that I believe happen in some proximity to each other and what they might be. If you aren't up for possible spoilers, there's a door. If I don't mention something, I don't have anything to say about it. I'll start with the trailers. One scene I've been able to cobble together is that of the most horrifying situation one could be in. Maintenance and repairs, where I feel like some unfortunate technician is about to get Brian levels of fucked up, with combined footage of animated tutorials, in-person footage of the robot, navigation of each robot in a computer, and possibly a guide or a few words from Susan Woodings herself, Or this specific image could be a news report for her missing case, but I think I can figure out the words cyberfun tech in the background, so I'll go with the former. Starting with a shot of the Banny animatronics endoskeleton, most likely going to be in the in-person video, along with this shot, but the lack of a stretched out Susan face indicates that this is either during the Relocate project or before her getting stuffed into Banny, where after the Relocate project her body has fully decayed, and before she can have had her head there in the first place. Now, looking at this image, this design confused me for a bit, since if you don't look at the caption, it looks a lot like Bond, but it's still Banny with the eye streaks and purple scheme. This SE.user format is something we see with Shaw and Boozoo as well. Still have no idea what SE is or stands for. Once again, if you know, comment below. We also see a digital cartoon Bond as a simplified logo, and I believe it's the little intro for the BSI system that this technician is using for maintenance and repairs, given that I've seen this image along with the SE.user teasers. Now this shot is very curious. I've heard that this is Bond inside the Infern Hotel, given the clear bunny design in the animatronic, and that this red wall to the right looks like one of those old hotel shelves that hang all the keys to each room. However, if you look closely, you'll see that this is actually Banny. Bond doesn't have eye streaks, Banny does, and Banny's tie is a lot droopier in comparison to Bond, who has a bow tie, while Banny has something more akin to laces. Now I won't deny that this could be the Infern Hotel, but what we have on screen doesn't quite have enough evidence for this to be what should be a big moment in the series, Bond entering the hotel. As well as the fact that we know Bond is probably supposed to be the one meeting Sophie in Infern, given that he's the one who's been let loose, and with this being Banny, I'm not quite sure it is the hotel unless all five are raiding her home at once. This shot/event in particular is one I keep seeing teased, and this could be after the Relocate project or before. At least that's what I thought before coming back to the realization that Bond is on the loose after his reactivation in File 1. And again, no streaks, eye streaks, bow tie, lace tie. The other time I see this teased is during the intro to Bunny Farm, where we get a bunch of flashbacks with this one of Bond's passing out standing on what appears to be the same stage. Something is definitely going to happen here, and it ain't good. We have this shot, which is what I refer to when talking about Jack possibly hanging himself in St. Juanis Forest and waking up inside of Bond. We also get another shot of this painted forest in the Season 1 trailer. Finally, for the fourth file trailer at least, there are two lines of dialogue. First you have,
So they're gone? Molly and Ed?
I'm not exactly sure who this voice is. It could be Charles, it technically could be Chris, but when I heard it another time I thought, oh, Felix forgot the last night happened as he said he would, and is reacting to the tape that he recorded. But then you also get this.
May 5th. 3 days after the accident.
And now, if he's saying hey sis, we officially have another witness that isn't in that hit list. Next, there's the specific string of teasers. Remember the thing about Bonds being investigated by the police? From earlier, you can hear, but in actuality read the subtitles and see, Hillary mentioned that authorities needed to check the place. The more I think about it, the more I think it's what may have happened on October 31st, 1974 from that timeline in Lucky You that I mentioned earlier. In the dark, investigating and exploring the establishment are the police who are about to encounter what is essentially the face of a brutal, graphic, and painful death as we see in these teasers. Finally, some last few teasers that I wanted to mention, but can't exactly siphon a whole scene from. This shot. Whose face is this? It's not Susan, and it looks a little like Rosie, and I'm not sure what Sophie would be doing here or why her face is being distorted like this, so I'm going to guess it's Rosie. Rocket sitting in a chair in what I presume could be anywhere, a domino of 5-2, otherwise known as May 2nd. We see Felix driving home from the crash, most likely completely losing it. This animated shot of a technician working on Billy, of all the ones that could have been worked on. I'm sure there will be quite the surprise once you take a peek inside. Shaw dancing while wearing a very rosy outfit, which I believe to be connected to this scene given the flowers. This looks like a credit snapshot given the voice of, caption below, and of course, a W. And that's everything I have for you folks. I must admit, jumping from a simple 3-minute message to some odd 40 minutes of writing to record was much more agonizing than I anticipated, and I could still feel throughout the entire thing how much work my voicing needs in both sound and physically in my throat. It's likely going to take a while for my voice to settle into a good, consistent sound and feeling. On the brighter side, this still ended up taking a shorter amount of time to record than the first time. That is, once I was able to fix Sony Vegas's NTDLL.DLL issue, which blocked me from working on this video for actual months. So I'm sure that's a good sign. The link to the solution that worked for me will be in the description, by the way. Other than that, I'm under your bed. And I bid you good night. Finally, for the fourth
Jack. Susan, Charles, Rosemary, Sophie.
Wow, it's pretty dark here. You should turn on the light. Turn on the light. Turn on the light. Turn on the...